Okay. Start.
Roshi, I'd like some background information about your early life. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Osaka, in Japan. Lived there until 5, and I moved to the small town named Tsuruga in Fukui Prefecture near Kyoto. I have grown up there and went to grade school and high school.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 5 brothers and 7 days, including me. 7 boys.
7 boys.
7 boys and 3 girls.
That's a lot.
And 3 children died. So 2 boys and 1 girl died.
In childhood, in infancy?
No, the girls they was 18 years old, drawn to death in the big river in Osaka.
Oh, drowned.
Yeah, drowned. And so now the 5 still boys live, and 2 sisters.
And were you the youngest?
I'm youngest.
The youngest.
Mm-hmm.
What did your father do for a living?
He did several things. When he was in Osaka, the pool business and pool business and public bath,
Public
bath, and also producing the Japanese rice cake and also selling a cosmetic stuff, and also selling their medicine. But all business were not successful. So finally, the last one was the restaurant. That was really successful.
Was that
successful
in
Tsuruga.
Tsuruga.
I was grown up there. Yeah. So that was really. He was very happy. Yeah. Finally.
How did you get into the Air Force in World War II? Were you drafted, or did you volunteer?
Well, those days, government they asked all young men, to either to go to the company to help,
Produce.
to produce the weapons and etc., or to serve the army or navy. So when I was at the high school, I think there no way to escape from 2 choices.
Yeah.
So in the school, they asked me to go to school. Let me go to the army without having a little test. In other words, without any test. The schools, they want to say, give a certain guarantee.
They guaranteed you?
Yeah, guaranteed me as a great small army person. So I was 16 years old.
16.
So no way to escape. So I went. So all those days, all young men from 16, 15, from 13 years old.
13.
Yes, no escape.
What year was that?
I was in Tsuruga.
In 1941?
Oh,
What year?
1940, 45, 40, 40, 43,
43.
43.
And then you were in pilot's training? Was that?
No, not pilot. I wanted to be pilot, but I was I couldn't pass in the test of the becoming a pilot.
Oh.
So I became aircraft engineer. Engineer. Yeah. In the battlefield, particularly taking care of fighting airplane in the battlefield. You know, arranging engines and checking all over and give it to the pilot. So very quickly we have to do. So that's what would you call the mechanic, air mechanic.
So you were in the Army 2 years?
No, 1.5
1.5
years.
years. And then you went into Zen training, and later you went to college.
Mm-hmm.
What college did you go to, and what did you major in?
I went to Komazawa University in Japan, in Tokyo, and majored General Buddhism.
General Buddhism.
General Buddhism.
Was this after you were at Eiheiji?
After age, yes.
And then you were at a small temple, and your teacher didn't want you to go to college. Is that right?
He didn't want me go because there was no deshi, no disciples, so he needed help. Yeah.
Can you cite a specific moment in your Zen practice when you crossed some sort of a threshold that changed your life?
Oh, Zen practice, you mean the Zen practice changed my life?
Yeah.
Yes, when I went to a monastery every day, really my life was changing because I had never experienced such a rhythmical and very calm and very scheduled. You know, I have never experienced to do that, and with in addition to this, I had never experienced, living with the people. Many people. I always living by myself, with my parents only. I was always thinking of myself, but at that time, I didn't have any ideas to think of me. So always I have to follow the schedules and think of what to do next, and paying attention to the behaviors and also other people, what they were doing. So very naturally, my life was really changing every day. Yeah.
When you were appointed to go to Los Angeles for 2 years, who appointed you?
Headquarters of Soto Zen school. They appointed me to serve Zen temple over there in Los Angeles for 2 years.
This is headquarters at Eiheiji?
Headquarters of Eiheiji. Anyway, as a whole, that is a headquarters for the Soto Zen school, including the main monasteries, main monastery and branches, small monasteries. Anyway, as a whole, that is headquarters.
That's headquarters.
Yeah.
I'm not clear on how the Soto Zen establishment is run. Do you still have a relationship with those headquarters?
Yes, personally, I am strongly connected with the headquarters and also monastery, the age monastery, etc.
Can they give you orders of things to do now, or are you pretty autonomous?
Pretty autonomous because they don't know what to
They
do.
don't know what you do.
Yeah, so they don't have any ideas, what to take care of, American people who are interested in that.
So they let you run
Yeah,
your own
yes.
show.
Mhm.
Do you have any hobbies or things you like to do in your spare time that you find interesting or relaxing? In other words, how do you spend your time when you're not
Well,
teaching or studying?
I don't have particular habits, but I like very much the walking around the lake.
Walking around the lake.
Walking around
Yeah.
by myself, this is very nice. And sometimes, I am alone in my room, and, just thinking, contemplating Buddha's teaching, and, etc. by myself, without doing anything, just sitting there. That's my then that is the things that which makes me relax.
Most relaxed.
Yeah, I feel joyful.
Alrighty, anytime you're ready.
Okay. Hoja-san, one of the students who knew that we were going to interview you said that she would like to ask you one simple question about, the question was, what is it all about?
Well, I don't know I think what I said to her probably have a certain background why I said so.
Right.
Uh,
The question would be maybe the Zen tradition.
well, the Zen tradition, I think, according to Zen tradition, if you really want to say something deeply or something important, I think you can just express something simply. It is simple, but it's very deep. So that is the Zen tradition. That's why you have to bring up something simply, as best as we can. If you explain so long, that seems to be very nice for us, but I don't think it is really, touching the heart of the people's heart, very intellectual. So I think simple word is very nice, which they guide people to touch something, even though they don't understand it. So that's why in Zen terms, very simple expressions and bring up something simply.
Reminds me there was a disciple of the Buddha, as I recall,
Mm-hmm.
who is the founder of this jhana tradition, perhaps. When the Buddha asked him a question, he held up a flower.
Yes. Just a smile. This is kind of very simple expressions.
Could you say what is the basic tenet or the guiding principle in Zen?
Well, that is a little bit. I have to make it clear. are you asking about the a certain scripture which the sort of Zen Buddhism what they depends on, or the teaching of the scriptures? You know?
Right. No, I wasn't thinking of a basic scripture. I was thinking of the people in this country very frequently would like us to say something in a very few words, maybe 25 words or less, and try to summarize what it is that we try to teach day in and day out throughout our lives. Would you say that the heart of the Zen practice is the understanding of emptiness? Would you say that it's just to meditate, just to sit? Or what would you say is the heart of the Zen practice, if someone asked you that?
Well, maybe simply speaking, the Shisho Funi, the practice and the enlightenment are not two. Or undefiled practice, undefiled continuous practice, undefiled continuous practice. That is simply speaking. Yeah.
Then you need to ask what is practice.
Okay. Right. Many people might not understand what you mean at that point about practice.
Practice and practice is not something human. It's not the human action by which you can go ahead, like climb the ladder one by one. But in Buddhism practice, particularly in Zen, practice is human action which is very profound and bringing peace and harmony to the person who is acting. That is a practice we call this. So in Japanese we call shugyo, means refined practice, refined human actions, not usual human action. Usual, in the usual sense of the human action, it implies to have a certain purpose why you act this and that, such and such. But religious, particularly Buddhistic, the action must be undefiled nature, which you can express peaceful life, harmonious life from each moment of human action. So that is practice and enlightenment are not different. So I think practice should be based on enlightenment, or in other words, practice must be based on or backed by rhythm of universe, and then practice, individual practice becomes very peaceful, harmonious, and profound. But usually we always see the practice in terms of individual ideas, individual progress. But we should think individual progress with all other beings in the universe. And then at that time, your practice becomes real practice and peaceful and harmonious. But it is very slow. That way it's very slow practice because we have never experienced that kind of human actions. So that's why people always they complaining, grumbling at this kind of practice.
Because they haven't experienced it.
Right.
They keep trying and they don't understand.
Yes. But the purpose of spiritual life should be so. Otherwise, why do you seek for the spiritual life?
Right.
Cyan.
Okay, you ready?
Well, when you guys, that, see that big smile, if we can get another shot of that. All right, go on.
All right. Roshi, you mentioned that practice
Mm-hmm.
is, it seems that you said it's a certain way of doing things. I didn't hear you say, for example, that there's any particular thing that you could do that would be practice and something else not practice. It's a way of being in your action. Is that correct?
Yes, the way in your action, yes, that's true. The how you deal with the actions,
Right.
with the body and the mind. How, in other words, it depends on the degree, how much your intention really devote into the actions, So that's why in the Genjo Koan, the Genji mentions seed and hear with wholeheartedness. Something. This is most important. And not only the spiritual practice, but whatever you do, skiing and sports. And without this, the human action with wholeheartedness, you cannot accomplish anything at all.
So, when one sits in Zen meditation, which you call shikantaza, just sitting, as I understand it, nothing happens. Now, if that's true, does that place where nothing happens, does that have a beneficial effect on the other aspects of your life?
Yes, strictly speaking, I think in when you experience absolutely nothing happen, then something happens. That something happens is really something new and fresh and vital, creative.
I see.
But we are obviously expecting something based on a certain expectation we have had. In other words, please sit down here. Yes, sir. Why? Camera is there. So camera watching me, that's why I have to sit, and etc. This kind of, always there is expectation we have had. And then we do it, But actually, if you want to have a really peaceful and harmonious life, day-to-day, right now, right here, or climb the mountain and so playing a football game, whatever you do, you have to exactly devote yourself to do on the basis of nothing happens. And then something happens, because nothing happens is exact implication of total freedom, liberation for the human actions.
I see.
Very pure.
I see.
So whatever you do, you can do. Say if you become lazy, you're lazy.
I see.
If you stick out your tongue, you can stick out your tongue, and it's the effects of everyone. So complete, that is a nothing happens. So-called emptiness.
So it's like a space. It breaks the domino effect of our lives.
Yes.
It breaks that cause and effect.
Right,
You
that's
get
true.
a space in there, and then you come up free.
That space is really, how can I say, In Japanese we call koku, akasha in Sanskrit, that is really vastness of space. Not only that this kind of space, you can see visible space, but including invisible or visible space, which is vast, That is called koku, or universe in Buddhism, 3,000 worlds, something like that.
Right.
Huge cosmic world.
And you enter that space or that awareness of that vastness in meditation on the cushion.
Yes, that's true. This is a very simple form which you can enter into, you can get into this very simple space, a simple form, a simple attitude, simple actions. And everything is perfect in situations. That's why zazen is important. So called, the undefiled practice I mentioned before.
I see. One last question on this point. What would it be that would defile the practice?
I think undefiled practice brings about, the fundamental energy, kind of spring water coming out from the ground. That is fundamental energy. I think religiously speaking, it is called faith. And that when this kind of fundamental energy comes up, very naturally it's expressed in various ways. That is called compassion. When you deal with, the object and subject, it's always there is a compassion.
But is there a way of sitting which you would call defiled practice? Or is there no difference between defiled and undefiled practice?
Well, undefiled, I'm talking about undefiled practices, complete samadhi. You would call samadhi, total concentration, total full devotion, full commitment. You can get into something without creating anything. Secondary. Nothing secondary.
I see. Nothing extra.
Nothing extra.
No shadow.
No shadows. Exactly full commitment.
I see.
This is undefiled, the practice.
No divided mind.
No divided mind.
No ambivalence.
Yet no.
I see.
And then that is called emptiness in terms of general Buddhism. On this base of nothingness, emptiness, okay? And then two dualistic world blooms, the defilement or undefilement. This is a concept of defilement or undefilement, these kind of things coming up.
But that comes up from that space.
Yes.
I see. Thank you.
Okay.
Roshi, you...
No, wait a minute.
Oh. Roshi, you've been living in this country about 24 years. In the last 2 decades or so, do you think that there has been some sort of spiritual renaissance that other people have talked about in the United States?
That's a little bit difficult questions, but I think this is not exactly correct, the answer, what I want to tell you, but from my feelings, from my experience. I think it may be spiritual renaissance in United States, but I think the kind of what would you say, the 1960s and 1970s and have rippled the lake of spiritual life in the United States.
They have what?
The rippled, you know. Just rippled, just ripples. Not exactly renaissance, you know, but ripples.
A spiritual ripple.
Ripples. So it's affecting the people so much, but not exactly renaissance for me. I think.
How about Zen in particular? Is it on the rise or on the wane?
I think Zen is not now. Zen is very not rising, but stabling and walking quietly now.
Are more people being attracted to
Yes, I think so. People are more interested, curious of what Zen is.
Because back in the 60s, that was when the first big wave came along of interest in Zen. But I've heard you say that was a kind of a unknowing interest. People thought it just meant spontaneity or doing whatever you feel like.
That's right. Now the Zen is a little bit affecting the American's life, so not so much excitement, you know. But many American people are a little bit, you know, afraid to get into the Zen. So still, Zen is the unknown and the strange religions. So that's why Zen is not popular now, but it's very quiet but going very smoothly now.
So at the level it is now, is it maybe sending down roots that will blossom later?
I think so.
Do you see Zen Buddhism as offering anything unique among the various Eastern or Western spiritual teachings? Or is it all pretty much a question of different approaches appealing to different temperaments, different kinds of people?
First question, would you say once more again, please?
Do you see Zen Buddhism as offering anything unique among, there's various teachings, Hindu and transcendental meditation and a whole variety of spiritual teachings from the East that have caught on with certain segments of the population. Is Zen, does it have something particular to offer in that potpourri?
Each Eastern religion has particular, characters. And so I don't think the only Zen is a very unique teaching among the Eastern religion. But the little difference point in Zen Buddhism is to focusing on the way how to be peaceful and harmonious day to day right now. This is practical, not intellectually, not something we try to learn. To learn means to get, to touch. If you touch it, it's already not something special. So, there's what we have, peace and real harmony is something you cannot touch, because, for instance, if I want to be really peaceful and harmonious in my life, right now, right here, I think I must be I, you know. I must be I, something like that. I settles my itself in itself like this. That time, this I is not something I can touch. Is that clear?
It just is.
Yes, the I, what it just is. That's it. So that is, for Zen Buddhism, try to focus on to that point. That is called peace and harmony. I always use that term. But that is a oneness, we call oneness. If you become one, if Nancy becomes Nancy and settles Nancy's, in the Nancy's life itself, is there something particular who can touch Nancy to know? Nothing. So that is called peace and harmony. So peace is not something touchable, but you can be there. That's why when you are there, immediately we can experience. That is a touch, you know. Experience is something you can touch. So, but something touchable must be backed by the untouchable. But when you touch something, we always become crazy about something you have touched, you know, you have experienced. That's why we completely forget something untouchable by which the human experience is supported or backed by. We forget. So that's why Buddhism always mentions truth and phenomena become one, always one. That oneness is very difficult to understand, but we do. We always live in that way. Otherwise,
Whether we understand it or not.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
And this is what makes Zen a little different.
Yes, a
from
little
the other
different,
Eastern-
unique point, you know.
How is Zen practice in this country different from Zen practice in Japan? Or in what ways is Zen becoming Americanized?
Mm-hmm. I think the Zen in the United States is I think pretty good because we have lots of opportunity to practice Zazen instead of studying the ceremonial stuff and custom, you know, the traditional, you know, the complicated, you know, for the formalities, you know.
And those are more common in Japan?
Yes, more common in Japan. But in the United States, I think we can have lots of opportunity to concentrate on the practice of Zazen. That is pretty good.
And lay people in Japan, do they practice Zazen?
Yeah, they do, but not many.
Not many.
Not many. And also, they do, but in a different way from Americans. For instance, in Japan, lay people do Zazen, but kind of the once a week and, you know, Sunday or, you know, some particular day. You know, the 2 hours, etc., sitting for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and then listen to the lectures. It's
Like church?
yeah, like once a week or once a month sometimes. Yeah,
But not the daily practice?
not daily practice. So and also not many people. Yeah.
That's the lay people?
Yes.
Of course, in a monastery it's different.
Very different. Yeah. And also in the United States is, that is a question. What that is the question you have made?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Roshi, this follows Nancy's question. In every culture, there are some individuals who care intensely about the ultimate value or the ultimate meaning of their lives. But there's never a great number of them. And it seems that most people are content with the moderate successes of their lives, making a good living and raising healthy children. But there's always a few, it seems, who are interested in the ultimate meaning of their lives.
Ultimate meaning of life.
Right.
What does it mean? Would you
Well,
explain?
the people who are deeply concerned with the question of the existence of God, or the big question of life and death. What is the meaning of my existence? Even apart from whether I'm eating or not eating, or whether I have a good job or a bad job, or whether my children are in school or whatever. There's the deeper question. That question is Zen especially designed for those deep divers, people who are deeply, deeply concerned about the relationship of their lives and the universe? Or is it really for everyone in some way?
Yes, it's for everyone, because I think everyone should be a deep diver. And then they have to come up to the surface of water again. Otherwise, just deep divers is not enough. If you dive, I think you should come back to the surface, to human life. So I think everyone should be a deep diver. That is very important. Forever, day to day, as long as possible, we try to be deep divers. But it doesn't mean keep away from the surface of water. So if you become a deep diver, naturally you can come up. If you have a strong energy to go deep diver, and then the more you can get, strong the powers to flow, to the surface. Just like a frog and jump into the water, and with this, power and weight, and then it's come up naturally,
Yes. Is spiritual growth or even enlightenment possible in today's busy, active world?
Yes, it's possible. It's possible. I think it is impossible for us to grow the spiritual life in a quiet world. I think in a busy and noisy world, the spiritual life should grow.
What do you see as the difference then between a monastic existence and running a bookstore on Hennepin Avenue?
I think broadly speaking, monastic life is not different from walking in the uptown street, because the more you are practicing in the monastery quietly with people, the more you realize how busy you are, and same as walking in the busy world, the busy street, So broadly speaking, it's not different. It's not different. But I think the circumstances are quite different. And also people doing what people do is quite different from, people who are walking on the street, So people in the monastery are always doing the same things and one things, And also they are really deep divers. So that's quite different. But broadly speaking, and individually, for me, it's not different. The more you try to be there, the more you know how noisy we are. So that's why, in the monastery, practice is getting difficult. Much, much difficult.
Is there an advantage to having a practice that you do the same way every day? Like at the same time you sit zazen in the monastery, at the same time the bell rings and you go and you work in the garden, at the same time you go and you eat, and each action is done in a similar way. How does that help us deepen how does that help us practice? Is that more helpful than working in the bookstore at Hennepin Avenue?
I think it's very helpful because if a schedule is going very stably, I think people cannot have any opportunity to look around. The schedule makes your life very simple. So it's very easy for us to do this, and also helpful so much. And also it depends on how the person who deal with this schedule, simple schedule, deal with. Schedule itself is not important, that is a secondary. But the point is how we deal with schedule.
Right.
In other words, degree.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you're in a monastery, in that frame of reference, you give yourself with
Right,
greater energy.
That's right.
Okay. And perhaps also is it true that if I do the same thing every day, month after month, I free myself from the need to use discriminating mind. If I work in a store, there's one customer comes in and then another one, and I have to make judgments all the time, how to deal with each one. And every day it's a little different. But in the monastery I don't have to make judgments. Is that because it's predictable? More predictable. Is that true?
Well, still the unexpected things happens, and also schedule. One of the schedule, like the weeding the grass, and the outside, and cleaning, wiping, and the backyard. It's that schedule sometimes changed, So there's sometimes unexpected change of the schedule. And also sometimes we have to think, and we have to think what to do, and because many people live together. So very naturally, expected things occur. But the broadly, our schedule is set up and make the monk's life simple.
American culture in the 1980s is filled with self-help philosophies and alternative healing practices such as acupuncture and visualization, holistic healing, body work. Lots of self-help practices. How is Zen different from a New Age self-help practice?
I think the Zen is, that is a self-help philosophy. Seems to me that they are kind of way to make people's life happy or healthy in their lifetime. But Zen, I think, focus on something more than a healthy way of life in terms of not only the individual this lifetime, but the life and death, individual life and death, in other words, for long run, including death. Then we have to think about how can you be healthy life. So the concept of a healthy life is a little different because then focusing on the depth of life. How can we be healthy? Through the life and the long range of life and death. Not only that this, a certain period of time, so go by this lifetime. You know, because no matter how long you make your body healthy, and of course Zen doesn't ignore that the healthy and spiritual life, peaceful life, but I think in a deep way, most people ignore the reconsideration of meaning of the happiness or healthy life. Their understanding very narrow. So deep Zen Buddhism tried to understand the concept or meaning of healthy and peaceful and happy or unhappy, and in a deep sense, once more again. In other words, reevaluate. And then we can deal with usual concept of the happiness or unhappiness, you know.
So there's a larger horizon
Yeah.
to
Yes.
the way Zen sees it.
Mm-hmm. So that's why a little bit different standing point. Zen standing a little different from the holistic and other bodybuilders in a way of healthy way of life. Stands in a little different from Zen way, you know. Because purpose is always to learn how to make your life happier and healthier in your lifetime. That's it. Without thinking of death, without thinking of the life out the world after death and for long run, you know. Because life is always going, you know.
So insofar as we do not take death and somehow include it within our concern for life,
Right.
we are still not in a large enough context.
Without thinking death, you cannot understand. The life, significance of life, and you cannot understand significance of healthy life.
Is there also a way of understanding within one lifetime? Say some of us are skeptical about reincarnation. And I understand that Zen doesn't worry about, in Zen you don't worry about whether it's true or not. That's not a big question.
Well, Zen doesn't, Zen also, and Buddha himself doesn't ignore that idea of reincarnation, but on the other hand, he doesn't attach to, he is not involved in concept of reincarnation or idea of reincarnation too much. Yeah, because reincarnation is very subtle, you know, teaching. It's not teaching at the, I think, aspect of human life. You know, it is very subtle. You cannot ignore it. You cannot attach to it. If you ignore it, life becomes very, you know, the realistic and materialistical and very intellectual, very neat, you know, understandable. But life is not always understandable, you know. Life has lots of things we don't understand it. Because it's connected with the past and the future, it's there, even though we don't understand it. So it's very deep. So but on the other hand, if you attach to reincarnation, you completely forget, you know, the day-to-day life because it's fascinating. If you think of reincarnations, because day-to-day life is lots of suffering, you know. So we don't like it, so that's why we are really excited by this kind of thinking of reincarnations, you know. So it's pretty hard to say, but if you think that reincarnation, if you feel reincarnation from present life, I think life becomes more broader and magnanimous and tolerant and very compassionate. And very helpful in a sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go right ahead. Roche, you'd like to stop for a while?
That's fine. That's fine. We can continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's a long distance one, it matter.
Okay.
No?
From your 24 years of experience as an Asian living in this country and observing Americans,
Mm-hmm.
what do you see as the advantages that contemporary Americans have in pursuing an authentic spiritual life?
Advantage.
Advantages and maybe disadvantages too.
Uh-huh. I think advantage is that American people are really open to learn of the what spiritual life, you know, in many ways, from lots of angles, you know, discussing and researching and practicing, and it's this kind of the great enthusiasm, very energetic way of seeking for spiritual life. It's very nice, you know. But disadvantage is that it seems to me that American people still learn spiritual life from the teaching in word, and in word, reading and listening. So according to the Buddhistic term, I think Shravaka. Shravaka means disciples, a person who attained enlightenment by listening to Buddha's teaching. So we are more or less Shravaka. You know.
We're very oriented to the lecture,
Yeah.
reading the scriptures.
Right, reading scriptures, and through the discussions, and they learned what the spiritual life. And then the problem is that the American people believe that is real spiritual life. A little bit that questionable for me. Real spiritual life is something you should learn from the person who has real spiritual life, you know. Like from your grandparents, you know. What is the sublimity of human life? In other words, how can you learn the sublimity of human life from your grandparents? Through the words, through the listening his story? No, I think you should learn something important, significant from that person, well, as best as we can, being with them and every day, you know. That without any intention to try to learn, but through the living together and doing something together, and then you can learn naturally. And the parents just simply show, you know, at that time we didn't understand how important it is, but later we can really understand it. So you can feel certain deep communication with the grandparents and life, you know. That's the important, that is a spiritual life, you know.
Is this what Buddhism has to offer for Americans, would you say? This more, is this something that Buddhism can teach Americans?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
That's one main way that Buddhism can affect Americans'
yes.
life, through this kind of teaching, experiential.
Experiential, through the person to person, okay? Not person, I don't mean that you should ignore learning something from the teaching in the word or listening to the teaching. I don't mean this, ignore. But we shouldn't forget the most important things as of a spiritual life is to learn something from a living person who really has perfect peace and perfect harmonious life, extended into his everyday life. That is most important, you know.
I've heard you mention your teacher at the temple where there were just the two of you, and how you hated it at the time, but later you came to realize that you had learned a lot from that man. Is that the kind of learning that you're talking about?
True.
Could you say a few words about that experience?
For instance, first of all, his life was always same, like water is going. Under all circumstances, whatever I did, whatever big mistake I made, his life was always going. Even though I grumbling at and I am mad at him and whatever I strived, you know, whatever I did, his way is exactly going. This is very nice, you know, but I hate it because I always try to get something excited, groping for something. We are always greedy, you know, but his life is really based on emptiness and undefiled, perfect peace and harmony. That is really helpful, particularly when I made a big mistake, you know.
Like
I
what?
get, what would you say, the man and woman's relationship and like this, you know, for example, you know. But in my case, it's not like that. But I made a big mistake, you know, fighting the boys in the village. So that is a big mistake. And then criticism, you know, came to me from village people. But at that time, my teacher, he didn't try to protect me on purpose. What he did was to let me be present there in the usual way. That's it. And then when he said to me something that I was very confused, and then I didn't do something correctly and very upset in my behavior. At that time he said, quietly, do something quietly, or something like that. Or my room is very messy and dirty. At that time he said, clean your room. Messy room is your messy mind, something like that. Very simply he says. but he always let me be present in the usual way. So I feel relief.
Is this where you were sick for several days, or you just didn't feel like getting up?
Yeah, that is after coming back from monastery. I was very nervous and kind of I couldn't eat. I lost the appetite, and so it was a very difficult time for me.
He told you, if you're sick, stay in bed, and if you aren't sick, get up.
Right, that's right. That's kind of things. But the most important thing I appreciate now is that he always let me be present first. That is very nice. Just like a mother holding a baby is always, you know. I didn't notice over there. But first of all, I feel a little bit of relief. I felt relief when went back to the temple. Because when went to the village, people look at me in a special way. So when I went back to the temple, well, I'd just be there. So that's really helpful and relief.
You talked a little bit earlier about how Zen practice is connected to peace. Is Zen connected with any part of the peace movement in this country?
Yeah, this is also a little bit we should understand the meaning of the peace, how we should, what kind of peace we want to deal with. You know, in other words, do we want to deal with secular peace or absolute peace? Absolute peace means basically means the foundation of human life is supported by absolute peace. You know, in other words, your foundation must be peaceful. What that is, I say, absolute peace or profound peace. But if you want to deal with a secular peace, that is a little bit difficult because it's complicated. It's connected with politics and etc. So no matter how long we discuss and fighting, and still the not perfect peace cannot come to be true. You know.
In the real world.
In the real world, always there is something obvious. But I don't mean that you shouldn't stop bringing up the peace in this real world. But that's why we should think once more again, what kind of peace do we want to deal with? Do you want to seek for the peace and secular peace in many ways, with many ideas, many ways and means, and in every means? If you do it, well, forever you have to do it. I don't know. There is no guarantee.
And no end to it.
No end. But if you want to deal with a very profound peace, I think it depends on the individual attitude. How to deal with the world now, okay? Day to day. At that time, you can bring up peaceful life. So from this point, then deal with real peace. But I don't mean Zen ignore secular peace. But the problem is that usually people always deal with the secular peace, and then the people believe that is real peace. Secular peace is real profound peace. I don't think. That peace is always changing, very impermanent, fragile.
Are you saying that the best way to deal with secular peace is to start with personal, profound peace?
Yes, I think so. Through the secular peace, if you want to secular peace, of course it is important, but I think it must be more digested. We have to think about once more again what the secular peace, In other words, we should have reconsideration deeply, of secular peace we are seeking for. Is that clear?
Yeah. If a lot of people are practicing in such a way as to try to achieve a personal, profound peace,
Mm-hmm.
does that affect the world too, or is it
Yes, I think
too subtle?
Yes, it's effect. It's effect very much, because one person to person, one by one. If you become really build up a peaceful world day by day, then the people around you naturally, even though you don't talk, I think people are affected by your living present, by your presence day by day. So it's very effective, to the secular peace in many ways, through your words, through your thinking, through your activities, in a very natural way. So that's why if, how can I say, some people criticize Zen because Zen doesn't, help encourage the people to, the help peace work and etc. But for me, I think the mission of the Zen teaching is focusing on that profound peace, which individually people can build up day to days under all circumstances, even though we are not, the world is not peaceful or peaceful. Anyway, we can do it. That is most important for us. But there are many different types of human beings exist that who want to emphasize to participate in that peace work. That's why if you want, that's fine. But you should reconsider relation of that secular peace once more again. In other words, the secular peace must be backed by that profound peace. Otherwise, you cannot continue to do it.
If you are engaged in this practice of trying to develop profound peace within yourself,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean that then you never feel anger anymore?
Yes, you can. You can see the anger. You can see the anger, but
you still feel anger.
yes, you can feel the anger.
But
But you
what's
can,
different?
different is just like a pendulum. If you feel anger, people always crash by anger. But if you always practice like this, building up a peace day by day, I think you are not completely crashed. Even though you are crashed completely, you spring back quickly, as soon as possible. But usually people are crashed and stay long with it. That's usual. So if you have a very peaceful, if you know peaceful way of life, I think you can feel you are sensitive to feeling of anger, hatred very much in your life.
Roshi, while many people are interested in Zen philosophy, they may not be attracted to practices of bowing and chanting and sitting cross-legged. Are those traditional forms of practice indispensable to an understanding of Zen?
Yes, broadly speaking, it's not necessary for the traditional, that's kind of form of bowing and cross legs and etc. Whatever you do, broadly speaking, you can experience samadhi and peaceful life between the mountains and you, if you climb.
Without doing this
Yeah, without
particular practice.
practice. So you can build up a peaceful life through the mountaineer, through the rock climbers, and through the sports, and etc.
Through sports?
Through the sports, still you can learn what the human life is. But I think that samadhi, what you can experience through the mountains and the rock mountains and the sports, must be deepened, extended into every inch of the everyday life. That is the most difficult for us, you know. For instance, if you become a mountaineer, only when you climb the mountain you feel really experiencing samadhi and peaceful, joyful, but when you go back to the usual way, as the people do, you know, they found lots of things they don't know what to do. So I think still there are lots of things they have to research, you know. So that's why, broadly speaking, it's not necessary to follow the Zen form. The sports and mountaineer and painting and photography and teaching and whatever it is, you can do it.
You can do it in anything, but you need some kind of teaching in order to get it.
Yes, I think you need a kind of, they would say, you need a samadhi you have experienced through the particular way, mountains. It should be integrated, in other words, extended into everyday life, into every inch of everyday life, you know. Is that clear?
Yeah. So that is the teaching, and that is the reason to come here.
Yes.
And make yourself
That's true.
have painful legs and do the difficult things
Yes.
in order to have that teaching.
Yes.
Okay.
Just go right ahead.
Okay. Roshi, I just have two more small questions.
Mhm.
One of them is one that comes up a lot, and it's one of the things that I find hard to explain to other Americans like myself. And that is the difference between sitting zazen in order to become enlightened and sitting zazen with no purpose at all. That's very hard to understand.
It's quite different between.
Yeah.
I think just sitting is not just sitting, in the usual sense.
Okay, right.
Just sitting is see or hear and with a wholeheartedness. This is just sitting, means that you have to really devote yourself to do zazen when you do zazen. You know, in other words, you must be exactly melted away in the ocean of zazen. You know, and then it's called just sitting, so-called peace and harmony. But this is a purpose of spiritual life. You know, but if you always seeking for something objectively, using the zazen as a means. So by zazen as a means, then I will get something in the future. That means you are not satisfactory of your life, present life. Then, by using this means, then I will be happy, etc. But that is real usual dualistic world. Everyone does,
Right.
you know. But a spiritual life is little different from that usual, pros and cons, success and failures, and the gain and loss, and give and takes way of life,
Right.
So because we want to build up peaceful and harmonious life day to day, that is of great questions and problem for us. That's why we come here and sit something and seeking for that perfect peace.
Now, let me give two cases. One, I come into the Zendo and I sit down, and it just happens that I immediately go into samadhi.
Mhm.
So at that time, I am not worried about sitting for a purpose, because I am satisfied.
Mhm.
The purpose that I'm sitting for is happening right now.
Mhm.
It's not distant.
Mhm.
But then other days I come and I feel tired, I feel nervous, my mind is bouncing all around, and that happens day after day. I'm not comfortable, my knees hurt. Now, if I sit, I guess my question is there a place beyond achieving the goal and not achieving the goal? Beyond both of those? And is that what it means to sit for no purpose?
Yeah, beyond. Yes, when you sit exactly as you are, as Zazen is, I think there is exactly something beyond, successful or not successful.
So even if my mind is full of heavy traffic,
Mm-hmm. As best as you can, you try to sit down right now, right here.
okay, and
For the
that's it,
moment.
for no purpose.
No purpose.
But also then, if I sit in samadhi, I feel wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I must also sit for no purpose then, right?
Yes, that's right. Even though you feel good from experience of real samadhi, it is exactly same as pretty messy zazen with experience of no samadhi.
Very good.
So beyond those, beyond this, the human individual experience, all we have to do is be present right now, right here, from day to day, from moment to moment now. That is best way. That is no nothingness and teaching of nothingness. This is undefiled practice. Undefiled practice. So even for a moment, if you can concentrate on right now, right here, that's great. But broadly speaking, even though your head is busy and your mind is going around, but totally you are here, broadly speaking.
And that's undefiled practice.
Yes, that's true. Broadly. That is, your life is really supported by Buddha land, Buddha's life. But human being doesn't accept human life with that broad, magnanimous feeling, like a mother's, compassion toward the babies, always holding, in her arm. But human beings are always greedy, forget something, forgetting the life which is being already supported and embraced by the non-thinking and the Buddhist word or emptiness. It's whatever you say.
The last question I had has to do with the monastery. Down on the border of Minnesota and Wisconsin, the Minnesota Zen Center has purchased 280 acres of rolling woodland and farmland. And the initial buildings are there for a monastery for the Midwest. What is your vision for that monastery?
Mainly, I would like to keep that monastery for their training the priest who can freely learn or not the traditional way of Zen teaching, which many ancestors and Buddhas and have transmitted from generation to generation. That is the first purpose. And then, secondly, that is my main hope, to build up monastery there for the priest who can freely train and learn the traditional Zen Buddhism. On the other end, if the people, lay people who are interested in that way of life, they can participate in that practice for a certain period. So they can join this. Well, that is the second way. So first of all I want. And also, so I'm thinking self-support, how do we, develop self-support. This is my big questions.
Yes. Well, it seems that in Japan they share your vision that Eiheiji Monastery has sent a large contribution to help that monastery forward. And that's the last question I have.
Roshi, in Zen teaching, I sometimes wonder where there is room, or if there is room, for feelings or emotions. It seems to me that all feelings are based to some degree on attachment, and the ideal in Zen seems to be no attachment. Are feelings to be considered bad or impure?
Zen doesn't ignore the feelings. But then emphasizes feeling much deeper. Then try to understand the feeling, human feeling, much deeply, much deeply, and how effective human feelings are in everyday life. Is that clear? Instead of ignoring, Zen doesn't ignore the feelings, but the much deep understanding, much deeper than usual understanding of feelings.
So, at the highest level of spiritual attainment, does this ordinary understanding of feelings, does that just fall away naturally?
Not fall away, but you can deal with feeling very smoothly, simply as you can. Instead of stumbling over and clashed and stay with long, and just simply you can deal with human feelings.
Like you were talking about a few minutes ago about feelings of anger, they still come, but you come back much more quickly from them.
As soon as possible.
Spring back.
Yes, spring back.
Is Buddhist compassion based on something other than just a feeling of compassion?
Oh yes, of course. And I think the feelings of compassion, usual sense of feeling of compassion, must be a kind of deep compassion. I mean, a profound compassion, which is coming up from the heart of your life, it means that you cannot help doing this and that beyond good or bad. That is a compassion, you know. But a usual feeling of compassion is, how do you feel from my compassion? You feel good? That is compassion feeling, you know. Now, always there is an object and always the feedback, you know, between. But real compassion, deep compassion, is kind of strong energies coming from the heart of your life. You cannot stop it. If you touch something deep, you cannot stop, and it's just coming up. So beyond the good or bad, right or wrong, you can do something good. That is compassion. For instance, when you see the little boys about to be drowned in the river, and in the storm, and you just jump into it, you know, beyond the good or bad, right or wrong, beyond the fear of death and life, and you can do it, you know, if really compassion coming up. But that opportunity is very rare in the human life, because we always share the compassion in the usual world, you know, where we can always exchange a human life and the positions and you know, in terms of give and take. So very naturally, you know, it's not real compassion, you know.
Real compassion, you can't help yourself.
No. It's really, sometimes you sacrifice your life, you know, but you are not sacrificed. You are very not, you're really joyful. You know. Beyond the joyful or not joyful, you just do it. You know. This is compassion.
Now, in Christianity, they talk a lot about love, and in many other philosophies in this country, you hear about love a lot. In this Zendo, I hardly ever hear you speak about love. Is that because love is one of these feelings that's more on the surface and doesn't touch the heart, or you know, what part does love play in Zen teaching?
Well, in the Christian term, I don't know exactly the real meaning of love, but in the Christian term, I think love is pretty close to the compassion. I think so. In terms of Buddhistic sense, I think love must be compassion. I have mentioned a few minutes ago. But in the Buddhism term of love is not the compassion, you know, in the Buddhism. So that's why a little different connotation. Is that clear?
Yeah. So you don't bring up love in your lectures. Instead, you talk about compassion, and you mean.
Yes, compassion. I think the little bit unique term, because compassion is not always to make the people feel happy. In order to help human beings, I think you should understand the good aspect of human life and also sad aspect of human life, the happy aspect and unhappy aspect. Both aspects of human life should be understood by person. Then you can share, you know, love. But if you say love in a narrow sense, I think we always give something good, you know. And then we don't like something sad, you know. So always, when you feel good, I can share the love. But when I don't feel good, I don't want to give you love because I don't feel love. You know? So that kind of things happens. But compassion is, I think you should really understand deeply the suffering, the unsatisfactions or unsatisfactory or the what would say impact, you know, impulse, you know, kind of unsatisfactions in a deep sense there. That is constantly, not exactly sadness, but that is sadness. The constant, very deep unsatisfactory makes you feel, sad or disappointed, because obviously there is something, the hole, through which the water leaks, That's why we don't feel this, happy and joy. So we should, and that's why Buddha mentioned life is characterized by suffering. So we should understand really this unsatisfaction or suffering of human life. And then we can really share compassion with the people. That is karuna. That's why compassion consists of the two terms, karuna and maitri. Karuna is mourning in a deep level of humankind's feelings. There is something of we are mourning, not scream, not very deep mourning. Mourning. You cannot say ouch and obviously there is a mourning. That
Down
is
deep.
Yeah, down deep. That is a karuna. Maitri is compassion, translated as compassion or friendliness, kindness.
I wonder if you could comment on the differences that you may note between the Midwest and the West Coast in terms of Zen practice.
I don't know exactly, but but I don't know whether my answer is fit to your question or not. But it's just the surface.
Okay.
I've experienced from people in West Coast. They are very active and open and international and trying to learn something always, something new, So if you have money, you can give the money to the people or to some organization in order to learn something he or she want to learn, So they are not stingy, So always give away many things, and physically or mentally. So that's why they're, active. On the other end, it's very noisy. So endlessly they are suffering. But the more they suffer, they are more, very active and
Giving more away.
Giving more away. That is the West Coast. But in the Midwest, people are very settled down, very rooted here, in day-to-day life. But they don't know how to use their life. Because very settled. Too settled. They don't know how to deal with their life and also their tradition and their money.
They don't know how, and they're not interested in learning how.
No, because they are settled already. So that's why they're slow. Very slow.
Okay.
I don't know if it is right or wrong. That's my feeling.
I think that's enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, I didn't realize we had guests on.
I just eavesdropped for the last few minutes.
That was very helpful.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you. Nice the mountain and desert cold.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
They did a nice job.